ruthless director believed he could get away with mistreating a horse behind the scenes of a film set, convinced that no one would challenge his behavior. But in his arrogance, he failed to notice one crucial detail: Keanu Reeves was watching. And unlike the rest of the crew, Keanu wasn't the type to stand by in silence. As Keanu navigated the quiet roads of Santa Clarita, the steady hum of his car's engine cut through the stillness of the countryside. The landscape stretched out in peaceful contrast to the looming structure ahead, a massive rectangular building that stood like an unwelcome scar against nature's beauty. Slowing down, he pulled into the near-empty parking lot of what appeared to be an abandoned storage facility. The faded sign above the entrance, Willow Creek Storage, barely clung to the wall, its chipped paint a ghostly reminder of what the building once was. Stepping out, the crunch of gravel under his boots was the only sound as he took in his surroundings: wooden pallets, scattered equipment, a quiet eeriness that didn't sit right. When he finally entered the cavernous main hall, the contrast to the outside was stark. Inside, the vast industrial space had been transformed into a makeshift studio, its high ceilings lined with exposed beams, industrial lights dangling from chains, black drapes partitioning different sections into film sets. Green screens and backdrops turned parts of the warehouse into temporary movie magic. Scanning the bustling scene, Keanu's gaze landed on a familiar face, Elliot Grayson, standing at the center of the controlled chaos, deep in conversation with a frazzled production assistant. Even from a distance, Keanu could see the weight of responsibility in her tense posture. Their eyes met across the room, and for just a second, Elliot's carefully maintained professionalism faltered. Relief flashed across her face before she quickly excused herself and made her way toward him, weaving effortlessly through the maze of equipment and busy crew members. "Keanu," she called, her voice carrying a mix of excitement and gratitude. "You made it." Their handshake turned into a brief but warm embrace. As they pulled apart, Elliot leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for coming all the way out here for this film, and for me. I know working with Martin Langston isn't easy for you, given your history with him. But I can't tell you how much I appreciate it." Keanu met her gaze, his expression sincere. "Don't mention it, Elliot. Anything for you. We've done great work together before, and I'm looking forward to what we can create this time." But as they spoke, Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. There was a tension in Elliot's stance, a flicker of unease in her eyes. This was more than just the usual pressures of a film set. Elliot subtly guided him toward a quieter corner of the warehouse, away from prying eyes. Her shoulders were tight, her glance darting around before she finally spoke, her voice low and deliberate. "There's something you need to know, Keanu," she said, locking eyes with him. "I'm not just acting in this film. I'm co-producing it." Keanu's brow lifted slightly at the revelation, but he let her continue, sensing that this was only the beginning. "We haven't announced it yet, but in 4 weeks, we're going public. My co-producer is, let's just say, extremely particular about quality. We can't afford any mistakes today." She ran a hand through her hair, a nervous tell Keanu recognized from their past projects. The pressure in her voice was evident. Keanu took a breath, nodding slowly. "I appreciate you trusting me with this, Elliot. You have my word, I'll give it everything I've got." A flicker of relief passed over her face, but it was fleeting. Concern replaced it as Keanu added, "I'm sorry for being late. I hope it didn't cause any problems with Martin." At the mere mention of the director's name, Elliot's expression darkened. And that's when Keanu knew something much bigger was going on behind the scenes. Elliot's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. She hesitated, carefully choosing her words before finally speaking. "About that. I know you and Martin have had your differences in the past. Are you sure you're okay working with him? I wouldn't have asked if I had any other choice, but..." Keanu took a slow, measured breath before responding. "I don't hold a grudge over what happened before," he said evenly, though the slight clench in his jaw hinted at unfinished business. "But I won't lie to you, Elliot, the man isn't the easiest to work with. Still, this project means a lot to you, and I'm here to support that. You have my word." Elliot exhaled, her relief evident as she reached out and squeezed Keanu's arm. "Thank you. I know you will give it your best, as always. Your professionalism is one of the reasons I was so determined to have you on board." With the air somewhat cleared, she led him toward the makeshift preparation area in the back corner of the cavernous hall. As they walked, she filled him in on more details about the production, her voice low yet animated as she outlined both the challenges and the unexpected opportunities that came with filming in such an unconventional space. The prep area buzzed with activity, makeup artists, costume designers, and crew members moving with practiced efficiency in the tight quarters. Elliot explained that Martin and the main crew were wrapping up a studio shoot and would be joining them soon for Keanu's scenes with the horse. "I'm looking forward to meeting her," Keanu remarked as a makeup artist began working on him. The process was quick and minimal, a reflection of both the tight schedule and the casual nature of the scene they were about to film. Elliot remained nearby, her presence a steadying force amidst the controlled chaos of the set. The atmosphere was charged, excitement and tension interwoven in the way they always were before an important shoot. Keanu's mind drifted for a moment, pulled back to his last experience working with Martin Langston. Their previous collaboration had ended in a heated argument, one that still played vividly in his memory. Martin's obsessive perfectionism had bordered on tyranny, his treatment of the crew leaving much to be desired. Keanu had stood up to him then, and it had driven a wedge between them. Now, years later, he wondered if time had changed anything, or if he was about to face the same old battle. Either way, he was ready. As the afternoon wore on, Keanu was led outside to the back of the warehouse. The sudden transition from the cool, dimly lit interior to the sun-drenched outdoors was momentarily disorienting, and he blinked, letting his eyes adjust. Before him stretched a small fenced area, where a magnificent brown horse stood by a trough, sipping water. Her coat gleamed in the sunlight, muscles shifting beneath her skin with each small movement. She was breathtaking. This, Keanu realized, must be Stella, his equine co-star for the upcoming scene. Two men stood nearby, their eyes fixed on the horse. As Keanu approached, one of them stepped forward, offering a warm handshake. "Mr. Reeves," the man said with a friendly nod. "I'm Berto, the animal caregiver for the production. It's a pleasure to meet you." He gestured to his companion, a younger man with a weather-worn face that spoke of long days spent under the open sky. "And this is Rel, a representative from the farm we rented Stella from." Keanu shook hands with both men, though his attention kept drifting back to Stella. There was something about her presence, a quiet dignity, an undeniable majesty, that commanded respect. Drawing from his past experience working with horses, both on film and in his personal life, he approached her with deliberate slowness and care. Every movement was calculated, open, non-threatening, his body language speaking a language of trust long before words were exchanged. He knew better than most how perceptive horses were. This first interaction was critical. If he wanted their on-screen partnership to work, he had to earn her trust first. Berto, watching closely, pulled a small bag from his pocket. "Here, some treats for you to give her," he said, handing Keanu a few carrot slices and pieces of apple. "Good way to break the ice." Gratefully accepting the offering, Keanu took another careful step closer, his voice dropping to a soft, soothing murmur. "Hey there, beautiful," he said, his tone gentle, almost reverent. Stella's ears perked forward at the sound of his voice, her large, intelligent eyes locking onto him with curiosity. "We're going to be working together today," he continued, holding out a carrot, his palm flat and steady. "I hope we can be friends." For a moment, the horse simply regarded him, her nostrils flaring slightly as she considered the offering. Then, slowly, deliberately, she stepped forward. The first bridge of trust had been built. Shooting. From what he gathered, it was a crucial moment in the film, a quiet yet pivotal interaction between his character and Stella. A bond was meant to be established, something genuine, something that would resonate with the audience. As the makeup artist worked with practiced efficiency, Keanu's mind drifted back to Martin's reaction earlier. The director had barely concealed his irritation at the idea of Keanu riding Stella to the farm, dismissing it as an unnecessary addition. But to Keanu, it had been more than just a practical choice. It was about connection, trust, the kind of authenticity that couldn't be faked on camera. By the time he was finished in makeup, the crew had completed their setup. The cameras were in place, the lighting adjusted, and the first assistant director was already calling for final preparations. Keanu strode back toward the set, his movements fluid, focused. He could see Stella now, standing near Rel, her ears flicking attentively as she observed the growing commotion. Martin paced near the monitors, barking last-minute orders before finally turning to Keanu. "All right, we're rolling as soon as you're in position," he announced, his tone brisk. "Let's not waste time." Keanu nodded, stepping forward to take his mark. As he reached Stella's side, he ran a calming hand down her neck, feeling the steady warmth beneath his palm. He could sense her alertness, the way she was still adjusting to the environment. He leaned in slightly, his voice soft but firm. "Just like before, girl," he murmured. "We're in this together." The clapperboard snapped shut. Action. And just like that, the world around them faded away, leaving only the man, the horse, and the unspoken understanding between them. Gently on her neck, feeling the tension still rippling beneath her coat. He could sense her unease, the way her muscles twitched under his touch, her ears flicking back at every sudden movement. Something was off, and the longer he stood by her side, the stronger that feeling became. Rel remained nearby, his face set in a deep frown as he watched Martin storm off to oversee the transport preparations. "She's never acted like this before," Rel murmured under his breath. "Not with me, not with anyone at the farm." Keanu glanced at him, his instincts sharpening. "Then something's wrong," he said, his voice low but certain. "And it's not just the new environment. Horses don't panic for no reason." Before Rel could respond, a crew member approached, signaling that the transport was ready. Stella would be taken back to the warehouse, just as Martin demanded. Keanu took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay level-headed. This wasn't the time for another confrontation, not yet. But as he helped guide Stella toward the waiting trailer, he made a silent promise: he wasn't going to let this go. Something was happening behind the scenes. And he intended to find out exactly what it was. Keanu's jaw tightened as he watched the exchange unfold, his patience wearing thin. Stella stood quietly beside him, her large eyes flicking between the humans in the room as if she understood the weight of the conversation surrounding her. The injuries weren't just the result of an accident, Dr. Vivian had made that clear. Someone had been mistreating this horse, and Keanu had a sinking feeling he already knew who was responsible. Rel stepped forward again, his voice calm but firm. "With all due respect, Mr. Langston, keeping her here isn't the best option. She needs a stable environment, away from the stress of production. Our facility is equipped to handle her recovery properly." But Martin was already shaking his head. "No," he repeated, his tone final. "I want her here. Dr. Vivian will run a full examination, and we'll decide from there. I won't have this delay derailing everything." Keanu exchanged a glance with Dr. Vivian, who clearly disagreed but held her tongue, her professionalism keeping her from outright challenging the director. But Keanu had no such restraint. "Martin," he said, his voice even but laced with warning, "you're thinking about this like it's just another problem on set, but this is an animal. A living being, not a piece of equipment you can just fix and throw back into the scene." Martin scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Oh, come on, Keanu, don't get dramatic on me. It's just a horse. We'll take care of it, and everything will be fine." Keanu took a step closer, his gaze locked onto the director's, unflinching. "It's not just a horse. It's Stella. And something tells me she didn't get those injuries from simple accidents on set." The room went silent. The weight of his words hung in the air, thick with unspoken accusations. Martin let out a humorless laugh, shaking his head as if Keanu was being ridiculous. "You're making it sound like someone's abusing the damn thing." Keanu didn't blink. "Aren't they?" Martin's expression faltered for just a moment, just long enough for Keanu to catch it. The flicker of guilt, or maybe irritation, before he quickly masked it with frustration. "I don't have time for this," Martin muttered, rubbing his temples as if the entire conversation was an inconvenience rather than a serious issue. "Fine. We'll run the damn tests. But I want results by morning." Dr. Vivian sighed, nodding. "I'll do what I can tonight." Martin turned on his heel and stalked out of the room, his frustration echoing in the sharp click of his shoes against the warehouse floor. The second he was gone, the tension in the room shifted. Rel exhaled, shaking his head. "I don't like this," he admitted. "Something doesn't sit right with me." Keanu patted Stella gently, his hand running along her neck. "You're not alone," he muttered. Dr. Vivian glanced between them, her voice quiet but determined. "I'll run the tests. But if I find anything suspicious, I'm reporting it." Keanu nodded. "Good. Because I'm not letting this go." He glanced down at Stella, who nuzzled his shoulder gently, her trust in him unwavering. Whatever was going on, he was going to get to the bottom of it. And this time, Martin Langston wouldn't be able to brush it under the rug. Straight to voicemail. Keanu's unease deepened. Something wasn't adding up. Rel must have noticed the shift in his expression because he asked, "What's wrong?" Keanu hesitated, debating how much to say, but instinct told him not to ignore the gut feeling gnawing at him. "Martin should have caught up with us by now," he said, slipping his phone back into his pocket. "And if he's not answering, I don't like it." Rel frowned. "You think he went back to the warehouse for something?" Keanu didn't respond immediately, but his mind was already racing. If Martin had returned to the warehouse alone, that meant he had an opportunity to do something without any witnesses. "Let's get back," Keanu said, his voice firm. Rel nodded, and the two of them wasted no time. They left the new horse in the care of the farm staff and set off toward the warehouse at a brisk pace. The sky was beginning to take on the golden hues of late afternoon, casting long shadows across the path as they walked. Keanu's mind reeled with possibilities. Had Martin gone back to check on Stella? Had he realized they had moved her into the main hall? Or, worst case scenario, had he figured out that Keanu had set up the camera? By the time they reached the warehouse, Keanu's pulse was steady but heightened, his senses sharpened by the nagging certainty that something was very, very wrong. As they stepped inside, the air was still cool from the portable fans, but there was a different kind of chill in the atmosphere, something heavier, more unsettling. The warehouse was quiet. Too quiet. Keanu and Rel exchanged a look before heading toward the far corner where they had left Stella. When they rounded the equipment cases that made up her makeshift stall, Keanu's stomach clenched. The space was empty. Stella was gone, his voice laced with desperation. "This man, Keanu Reeves, he's trying to sabotage my production. He's making false accusations, disrupting the set, and..." One of the officers, a tall, no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes, held up a hand to silence him. "Sir, slow down. We received a call about an animal cruelty report. Are you Martin Langston?" Martin's mouth opened and closed, his face contorting as he scrambled for an explanation. Look, there's been a misunderstanding," he stammered. "It's just a horse. We were handling things internally, but..." Keanu stepped forward, his calm presence a stark contrast to Martin's frantic energy. "Officers, my name is Keanu Reeves. I called you because I witnessed this man physically abusing an animal under sedation. We also have reason to believe Stella, the horse, has suffered ongoing neglect under his supervision." The officers exchanged a glance. "And you have evidence of this?" Keanu nodded, pulling out his phone. "I set up a camera inside the warehouse earlier. It should have captured everything." He scrolled through the footage quickly, then turned the screen toward them. "Here's Martin, kicking her, yelling about how useless she is. If you need more, Dr. Vivian, the on-set veterinarian, can confirm Stella's injuries and signs of mistreatment." The lead officer's jaw tightened as she studied the footage, then turned to her partner. Call it in. We'll need animal control on site. Martin's face drained of color. Wait, this is ridiculous. That's taken out of context. His eyes darted between them, searching for an escape route, but the officers had already made their decision. Mr. Langston, the officer said, stepping forward, you're being detained for questioning regarding allegations of animal abuse. She gestured for him to turn around. Hands behind your back. No, this is insane. Martin shouted, stepping back as if he might run. Do you know who I am? I'll sue every single one of you. Keanu watched, expression unreadable, as the officers efficiently restrained Martin. His protests turned to unintelligible rage as they guided him toward the cruiser. As the second officer moved to follow, Keanu stopped him with a quiet request. Please, check on Stella inside. She needs proper care. The officer nodded. Animal control is on the way. We'll make sure she gets the help she needs. Keanu exhaled, feeling the tension in his shoulders finally start to ease. Behind him, Rel, Berto, and Dr. Vivian had emerged from the warehouse, watching as Martin was taken away. Elliot arrived moments later, breathless, having rushed from the farm when she heard sirens. She looked between Keanu and the police cars, putting the pieces together. Is he? Keanu nodded. Yeah. It's over. Elliot let out a shaky breath, then looked toward the warehouse. And Stella? Keanu glanced back at the building, his expression softening. She's safe now. For the first time since this ordeal began, he truly believed it. The story of Stella, a tale of rescue and redemption. This man, he's trying to sabotage my movie. We have a history of conflicts, and now he's making up wild accusations about animal abuse. Martin's voice was frantic, his words tumbling out in a desperate attempt to regain control. The officers exchanged skeptical glances, their expressions unreadable as they assessed the situation. Keanu, calm and composed, stood his ground. His hands remained visible, his posture relaxed but firm, radiating quiet authority. Why don't you tell us exactly what's going on here, sir? One of the officers asked, his tone professional but laced with doubt. Martin launched into an increasingly tangled story, half-truths, exaggerated conflicts, and outright fabrications. He spoke of long-standing grudges, alleged threats from Keanu, and a supposed vendetta against the film. But the more he talked, the less convincing he became. His gestures grew wilder, his voice more erratic. Keanu simply waited, letting Martin entangle himself in his own web of deceit. When the director finally ran out of steam, Keanu spoke, his voice steady. Officers, if you'll follow me, I can show you exactly what happened. He gestured toward the warehouse entrance, leading the way. As they walked, he calmly recounted the events, Stella's strange behavior, the injuries discovered by Dr. Vivian, and his growing suspicions. When they reached the makeshift stable, Keanu pointed to a camera mounted nearby. I had a feeling something wasn't right, he explained, adjusting the camera's settings. So I activated this earlier as a security measure. It captured everything that happened here. Martin's face drained of color. His bravado wavered. You set me up, he sputtered, eyes wild with disbelief. Keanu shook his head. The camera was for Stella's protection, he said firmly. It was meant to allow us to monitor her from the farm. I never imagined it would capture what it did. One of the officers stepped forward, reviewing the footage. A few moments passed in heavy silence before he nodded to his partner. The footage is clear, he confirmed. We need to take this as evidence. The reality of the situation sank in. Martin's defensiveness crumbled into sheer panic. You can't do this, he shouted, pointing an accusing finger at Keanu. I'll ruin you in this industry. You'll never work in Hollywood again. Keanu didn't flinch. He simply watched as the officers moved in, reading Martin his rights as they restrained him. The director's furious threats echoed hollowly through the warehouse, his last desperate grasp at control slipping away. As Martin was led to the waiting police cruiser, Dr. Vivian and Berto arrived, their eyes wide with shock. "I can't believe it," Dr. Vivian said, shaking her head. "I knew something wasn't right, but I never imagined it was this bad." Berto moved to Stella's side, stroking her neck gently. "No wonder she was so skittish," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "Poor girl must have been terrified." Just then, Keanu's phone rang. Elliot's voice, tight with concern, came through the speaker. "Keanu, what's going on?" "We heard sirens from the farm." In measured tones, Keanu explained. Elliot let out an audible gasp. "I'll be right there," she said, ending the call. As the police wrapped up their investigation, the reality of what had happened settled over the set. The day's shoot was over. The film's future uncertain. But as Keanu looked over at Stella, now resting peacefully, he knew one thing for sure: they had prevented a far greater tragedy. A new beginning. The next few hours passed in a blur. Officers collected statements. Crew members gathered in stunned silence. The warehouse, once a place of creativity, now felt more like a crime scene. Elliot arrived, rushing to Keanu's side. Her face was pale, her expression filled with disbelief. "I can't believe this," she whispered. "How did we not see it?" Keanu placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Martin was careful," he said. "He did this when no one else was around. But what matters now is that we caught him. And Stella is safe." As if on cue, Dr. Vivian approached, her face etched with concern. "I completed a more thorough examination," she said. "Her injuries are worse than I initially thought. She's going to need extensive care and rehabilitation." Elliot's face fell. "The budget," she began, but Keanu cut her off. "I'll cover it," he said without hesitation. "Whatever she needs. For as long as she needs it." Elliot looked at him, stunned. "Keanu, you don't have to. The production's future is uncertain," he said gently, "but Stella needs help now. This is the right thing to do." Elliot's eyes welled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. As she stepped away to call her co-producer, a man approached, his presence commanding yet warm. "Mr. Reeves," he said, extending a hand. "I'm Jake Miller. I own Willow Creek Farm. I can't thank you enough for what you've done for Stella." Keanu shook his hand firmly. "I'm just glad we caught it in time," he replied. "How long have you known Stella?" Jake's expression softened. "Since she was a foal," he said. "We trained her ourselves. She's always been special." His face darkened. "I worry about how this will affect her. She's always trusted people. This," he exhaled heavily. "This could change that." Dr. Vivian nodded. "It won't be easy," she admitted, "but with proper care, there's hope. Horses are resilient." Jake's resolve hardened. "We'll do whatever it takes." As they finalized Stella's rehabilitation plan, Keanu's mind drifted back over the day's events. Martin's insistence on bringing Stella to the warehouse, his need for control, it all made sense now. He had wanted to isolate her, to keep his cruelty hidden. The thought made Keanu's blood boil. But he forced himself to focus. What mattered now was Stella's future. As the night deepened, the warehouse emptied. Police officers left with their evidence. The production crew dispersed, still shaken. Keanu stayed. He watched as Dr. Vivian and Jake carefully prepared Stella for transport. The horse, once so skittish, now stood calmly, as if she knew the worst was over. When it was time to load her into the transport trailer, Keanu stepped forward. He stroked her nose gently, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're going to be okay, girl," he murmured. "You're safe now." Stella nickered softly, her dark eyes meeting his, filled with quiet trust. As the transport truck pulled away, Keanu followed in his car, watching over her as they made their way back to Willow Creek Farm. When they arrived, he stood at the stable door, watching as Stella stepped into her new home. Despite the day's trauma, a bond had formed between them. a connection that felt deeper than coincidence. "I'd like to visit her," Keanu said, turning to Jake. "If that's all right." Jake smiled. "I think that would be good for her. And for you." As Keanu watched Stella settle in, he felt a quiet sense of peace. This wasn't just an ending. It was the beginning of her recovery. And maybe, in helping her heal, they had all found a path toward healing themselves.